Shabbat Shalom again. One of my very favourite comedians, Amy Poehler, dedicates an entire chapter entitled Plain Girl versus the Demon, found in her very funny autobiography entitled Yes Please, in which she outlines what she calls a demon voice. She describes it as that voice that talks badly to you, which rears its head to tell you that you are fat or ugly or don't deserve love even, or any other number of horrible things that it could say. It might show up in different ways at different ages and stages, and whisper different thoughts depending on where we are at. The good news, Poehler writes, is that we can generally live lives in which it is forgotten or at least relegated to the back shelf when surrounded by good people and good support, silent like our cricket friend from earlier, despite occasionally making a chirp. As we get older, we start to learn how to live with it, to stick up for ourselves and not give it too much space. It becomes an exercise in choosing which voice to listen to. And our Jewish calendar this week locates us at the crossroads of two possible paths down which we might travel, maybe more than two. The first course is charted in our parasha this Shabbat, Tetzaveh. In it, we read all of the elaborate details of the sacred vestments worn by the high priest when they performed their temple service. These ornate pieces of clothing consisted of gold and blue and crimson and purple, these royal colors, and were made of the finest yarn with precious stones sewn in. Clearly, they were made to be seen and made to be noticed, and to capture our hearts and minds, to inculcate a sense of reverence as we sought to inch closer to a source of beauty beyond ourselves, namely the divine. To paraphrase the late, great Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, although it appears to run countercultural to many of our Jewish values, after all, we're a people whose central prayer is the Shema, meaning to listen, not to see, and for which we cover our eyes. But Sacks believes that aesthetic beauty has substance because it has always served that higher spiritual purpose. Rabbi Sacks subsequently makes the point that it's difficult to listen to the Kol Dmama, the still and silent voice, when we can't envision anything else except an overwhelming power, manifested only in miracles and unique events, but not in everyday life. The vestments of the priest and the Mishkan itself therefore become the visible, tangible signs of God's continual presence among the people, and representative of that very human need for the physical reminder that we must work and work hard to listen to that voice which teaches us to become our best and most authentic selves, that we may serve our God and our small pieces of the universe in awe. That's why, for example, that I, as a rabbi, take that tiny moment to enwrap myself in a talit before leading even a Friday night service, during which talitot are not traditionally donned. The other path winds throughout the scroll which we will read from this coming Monday evening, the Megillat Esther, the scroll of Esther. We may already be familiar with the idea that Esther, at the command of Mordechai, her uncle, literally, Ka'asher tziva aleha Mordechai, as Mordechai commanded her, Esther is instructed twice to conceal her identity and not to make known her people or her kindred. In fact, this is the very reason that the rabbis attribute the queen's name to her, as they make a very clever connection between the name Esther and its similarity to the Hebrew verb histir, meaning to hide. Yet, Esther does make herself known in the end, and overcomes this voice of doubt and fear in her mind in order to confront her husband and save her people. As a result, the rabbis will extol her virtues and remind us that Esther's name is originally given as Hadassah, meaning a myrtle. Esther was righteous, they teach, and the righteous are referred to as myrtles in our Psalms. As a righteous person, Esther knew exactly when to use the sweet smell to her husband, the king, and to unleash the bitter taste, of course, against Haman. and it's a little too early to make the booing noise or to to swing the groggers around, so we won't do that until Monday. Like myrtles which dry up in the winter and the summer, neither do the righteous which do not dry up in either the winter or the summer, neither do the righteous dry up in either this world or the world to come. In other words, reading between the lines of our sages, by listening to that voice that led her towards bravery and action, instead of shying away or letting fear overcome her, Esther carved out for herself an eternal legacy. Importantly, our parashah and the Megillah function as cautionary tales to ensure that this inner voice is not destructive, does not become demonic, if we were to use Paula's language. The Shabbat, which is, as I mentioned, Shabbat Zachor, makes exactly that point as we remember Amalek and are commanded, lo tishkach, not to forget, and to blot out this evil name. It is taught that Haman was a descendant of Amalek, a people ingrained with an innate hatred of the Jews after their matriarch, the princess Timnah, was rejected from becoming Jewish and chose to become a servant to the descendants of Esau, as relatives of the Israelite, rather than to remain a princess among her own people. This is thought to explain Haman's ultimate goal to annihilate the Jewish people, as he was, according to this logic, born with this inherent desire to seek vengeance for this disgrace. This leads us to potentially ask ourselves, what if Haman had gotten his way and his cruelty been allowed to prevail? Sadly, we see the results of this in our own time, and it is listening to this voice of pain and destruction that leads to incidences like what we've seen in Israel this past week with the murders of Hallel and Yagel Yaniv, as well as Ellen Ganelis, the 3 young men killed in this tragic series of terror attacks in the West Bank town of Huwara earlier this week. Whilst we might wish to block out such sadness from our minds and memories, we can pray that we do not suffer such other devastating blows in our own day. We can remember, however, that the voice of Amalek exists within ourselves too, as evidenced by the retaliatory settler riots or the Israeli finance minister Bezalel Smotrich proclaiming that Israel should wipe out that entire village. In spite of our better natures, the voice of harshness in our own heads can be hard to quiet, especially at periods of spiked emotion and tension. It may be that this voice, which Paula writes about, might never completely go away, but the kol zachor, to remember, is here to teach us not to become like those who would wish to hurt or even destroy us. With this in mind, it is poignant that our parasha begins with the injunction to craft a ner tamid, an eternal light, which is to be kindled before God throughout the night, but which now burns endlessly above the bimaot in our worship spaces, including right above me here. Therefore, this Shabbat, may we each learn to listen to the voice which leads us to light, even when it can sometimes be hidden, and even when there is much darkness surrounding us. May we be led down paths which let our light shine brightly, allowing us to bring just that little bit more beauty into our world. Ken Yehi Ratzon, Chag Purim Sameach, and Shabbat Shalom. We rise as we turn to page 130.